a 70-pound kettlebell.
Radio show, man, they everywhere.
Hi, Jerry. Tuned in for another episode of Baked Out Radio Show, and I have another Zoom interview for y'all. I have Aleks Salkin, who is I guess strength
All
trainer.
sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and then author. But I thought was very interesting was the kettlebell because you normally don't like see that, I guess, displayed in advertisement or strength training. At least I haven't been able to see that. You normally see the deadlifting, free weights, things of that nature. Sure. So Alex, tell us a little bit about your journey. I was reading where you was introduced to this and back in like 2008, and I guess in 2010 is when you turned it into a business.
That's right. Yeah. It's funny because I grew up as sort of like scrawny, unathletic, weak, goofy, really uncoordinated. Picked not quite last, but usually like second or third to last for team sports in public elementary school and middle school and what have you. And nothing really screamed like you must do this in terms of like my physical fitness as a kid. And I always wanted to be fit, and I tried to stay physically active, but like team sports, which is the main way I think that kids excel physically. It was just something that didn't really speak to me. But the individual aspect of lifting weights, at least traditional weights like, kettlebell, or not kettlebell, but rather like barbell and dumbbell and things like that. And also, like, I tried my best with them, and I saw some early success, but it wasn't really something that caught me very very particularly. And it wasn't until I discovered the kettlebell in 2008, thanks to a friend of mine who was very insistent that I give them a try, that I really kind of started to take off. And even though I could say in earnest that maybe 2010 was around the first time that I was able to turn it into a business, realistically, it was probably more like, I would say like 2011, because I got certified as an instructor in 2010, but I got my first client in 2011, and then more of them kind of started rolling in. And then eventually, next thing I knew, I was doing a corporate fitness program at a local TV station. And I realized, this is really what I want to do. This is the sort of a thing that I could see myself doing long term. But it's not always easy to cash in on your passion, because sometimes it's not easy to understand, well, what is it that makes what I'm doing not only more beneficial to people, but how do I get that across to them? I'm sure you've experienced this. There's something you're passionate about. You try to tell people about it. And then when you're explaining it, you're just looking at their eyes glaze over. They're like, you're having a hard time explaining like why this thing is so cool. That was me with the kettlebell for a very long time.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it's not like talked about a whole lot. So in doing so, like you start working with the kettlebell. At what point did you see where one, what you was doing with the kettlebell started working? Like, how long was that process for you? And then what would be like some advantages of working with the kettlebell versus, all the other stuff that people work with?
Okay, so first question was, when did I start to notice some results with the kettlebell, like personally in my own training? Well, I would say immediately, really, because I noticed, maybe what it was that it wasn't that I was seeing results immediately, but I could see like the path toward results, because I was doing stuff that required my entire body to move, as opposed to just like one joint at a time, like curls or tricep extensions, kind of the stuff that we all get accustomed to early on. So I would say immediately I started to notice a difference. It was like, now my whole body's moving together. I feel like a lot more explosive. I feel like I can lift a lot more weight, and I can make some really great headway. But realistically, it was probably within the first couple of weeks or months that I started to notice specific differences. And I can recall specifically as well that I went from being able to press like a 35-pound kettlebell overhead is when I got started, which is, pretty normal. But within about I want to say like 8 months, I could press a 70-pound kettlebell
Mm,
overhead. So, and again, from somebody who was perpetually picked almost last for
mm,
every sports team and, was scrawny and unathletic,
mm,
this is a big deal.
mm,
And so when stuff like that started to happen, I was like, okay, this is what I really need to be doing, and I need to stick with this. And I also need to figure out how I can get other people interested in this, because like I
mm,
just said, like I would try to explain, like
mm,
what most people do is like I try to explain what it was,
mm.
and people are like, okay, well, who cares? It's like a ball with a handle. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like what's the big deal? As opposed to what it does for them.
Mm-hmm.
Even just describing what it does for me, a lot of people can't. They can't really. They can't really identify with it. So I have to be
Mm-hmm.
able to. I had to be able to describe. Okay, what can it do for you? And your second question, remind me so that I don't answer the wrong question.
Oh, well, shit, I just forgot because I'm sitting there so tuned in to
Yeah. I I was gonna
the
make a
first
joke.
one.
It's like, yeah, like Chuck Norris joke. He
Look,
he
uh-huh.
he didn't dial the wrong number. You answered the wrong phone. So I
Yeah.
didn't want to do the same thing. Like you asked the wrong question. I gave you the proper answer.
Uh-huh.
Um, but here's what I would say in terms of I think it was why people should consider using a kettlebell.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
Versus the other ones, yes. Other
exactly.
pieces of
What I would,
equipment.
yeah, what I would say is that a lot of times people ask this question. I think it's a really good one, but I would also encourage them to think not in terms of either or, but in terms of both and. Like if
Okay.
you're already, let's say, you have some sort of a physical fitness regimen of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's running, maybe you
Mm-hmm.
go to the gym and you hit the machines or you lift the free weights. Then a good question would be, how can the kettlebell help you with your
Mm-hmm.
current routine so that you
Mm-hmm.
can add it? It's kind of like a both and sort of a thing, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to abandon everything else. Because I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the right answer. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let's say you're training for a 5K or
Mm-hmm.
maybe a half marathon or a full marathon, then it would be crazy not to run because you're going to show up completely jacked up, or you're
Mm-hmm.
going to end up completely jacked up if you're not actually preparing for that specific event. And I
Mm-hmm.
would say similarly, if you are enjoying the stuff that you do in the gym and you're
Mm-hmm.
simply looking for ways to make it work even better for you, then
Mm-hmm.
by all means, you're going to be in a much better position in most cases if you can intelligently include something that will add some complementary element to it. So I'll give you an example. Um, Most gym routines, I think it's safe to say, at least for gentlemen, are focused around the strengthening and building up the muscles we can see when we look in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
In my niche of the fitness industry, we like to call these the show muscles. They're the
Mm-hmm.
ones that you can kind of show off and that sort of a thing. Whereas the muscles in the back of your body, we would call the go muscles. And these are the ones that are largely responsible for athletic prowess. So your back, your glutes, the hamstrings, things like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think one great example of how to add the kettlebell into an existing program to enhance it would be to simply learn how to do something like a kettlebell swing. Now, it does take some proper instruction. Some people who have really good, mind muscle connection may be able to figure it out on their own. But generally speaking, you'll do better if you get some actual, in person instruction on it.
Mm-hmm.
And, but what the swing is basically kind of like you think about like a deadlift where you're just lifting a weight off the ground and you stand up. It's sort of like that exact same movement, but it's done in a ballistic manner. So it's done with a bit more momentum. So what this
Mm-hmm.
does is this allows you to take advantage not only of
Mm-hmm.
the unique construction of the kettlebell, but it also allows you to build up a good degree of explosive lower body power, which most of us really don't build much of in the gym unless
Mm-hmm.
we're doing something like maybe sprints on
Mm-hmm.
on the treadmill or things of that nature. But it's very gentle because there's no impact, meaning even with sprints your feet have to hit the ground at a certain point. For some people it's just a little bit too much. It's a sort of an exercise that can be scaled relatively easily to just about anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a great addition to just about anybody's training program, not just for the explosive lower body benefits that you get from it, but also because your heart and lungs are going to take a hit too. So there's a little bit of we'll call it a lowercase c cardio benefit to
Mm-hmm.
swings as well.
So with the kettlebell in particular, can it be used as or in part of a rehabilitation um, workout. So like, let's say if someone had like back problems or something like that and wanted to strengthen, would you be able to use the kettlebell in that instance?
I would say with the blessing and direction of a good rehab specialist, it's very,
Mm-hmm.
very possible. I think it depends a lot on the nature of the issue because
Mm-hmm.
there are a number of physical therapists, a very well known physical therapists, who have been singing the praises of the kettlebell for a long time. So, a
Mm-hmm.
good example would be Gray Cook, who's the
Mm-hmm.
founder of the Functional Movement Screen. I believe he's been the physical therapist for various NFL teams and things of that nature. He's a really big fan of the kettlebell for rehabilitative purposes,
Mm-hmm.
obviously under the right circumstances. Other people like Professor Stuart McGill, who is probably the world's leading expert in spine biomechanics. He's a professor out of university in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and he is again someone who has sung the praises of kettlebells for a very long time. Really comes down to the individual because kind of like with anything, there are going to be certain pieces of equipment that are going to work well for certain people depending on what their fitness goals are. But I
Mm-hmm.
think the same could be said about rehabilitation goals,
Mm-hmm.
meaning you might have a physical therapist who would say, okay, your problem is that your back is weak and you just need to strengthen it, and deadlifts are a good way to do it, so let's start with kettlebell deadlifts. Or maybe your shoulders are not very stable, so we're going to do this, that, or the other kettlebell movement to help stabilize your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
So it absolutely can. I think primarily the kettlebell is phenomenal as a piece of exercise equipment, but in the right hands it can be a real power tool for rehabilitation specialists as well.
So why isn't this particular instrument like viewed as in the masses like other things are? Is it because it doesn't like look sexy, or is it due to
Hey, Jaylene over here at Barber's Tax and Credit Repair. We just want to let everybody know that there are a required list of documents that is necessary when you are filing your taxes. So we're just going to list them off and get that started. Firstly, we want your state ID or your driver's license, and it must be valid. Also, we do require a social security card, a W-2, 1099, insurance card, a DBA with business ledger, a lease contract for new clients, copy of your bank check, dependent social security card, birth certificate, dependent's insurance card, school records and or doctor records, and then a letter from the dependent's parents. All signed documents must have a copy kept in the tax customer file. This includes the bank application, consent to use of tax return, Form 8879, and a state e-file form. We look forward to servicing all your tax needs.
the way that you have to use it is impractical for a lot of people, or they just don't understand, in your opinion?
I
Or that
think it
doesn't
looks
get the
sexy.
look.
That's me. But I think for a lot of people, they think it looks weird. The thing that I've noticed over the years has been that a really big, it's a subtext. People normally may not tell you this, as a personal trainer, but they don't want to look stupid. So
Mhm.
if they're being asked to do something, even if it's super effective, if they feel that it makes them look stupid or
Mhm.
silly or embarrassed, they
Mhm.
may be less likely to do it. And the other
Mhm.
thing is also, I would say, part of that is if you just look like you don't have a lot of competence with a
Mhm.
particular thing, then by extension, you're going to maybe feel like you look stupid
Mhm.
or like you don't know what you're doing or whatever the case may be. So I will say this: in the 15 years that I've been using kettlebells, we've
Mhm.
gone from like nobody knowing what a kettlebell was. Like I would try to describe it to people, and it was like I was playing Pictionary. You know,
Mhm.
it was like I have to do this. It's like a ball, like a cannonball, and there's like a
Uh-huh.
handle on it.
Uh-huh.
So I'm using my hands to try to describe, and people are still drawing a blank. Like I can't even imagine what this looks like. To
Mhm.
nowadays, people more or less know what they are. Um, they just may not necessarily have any experience with it. So
Mhm.
I do think that the kettlebell is still unique in the sense that, unlike barbells and dumbbells, where there's a certain like understanding culturally how to
Mhm.
do some things with them, even if people aren't doing them well, people more or less know what a bench press is supposed to look like. It's
Mhm.
like you lay down on a bench, You lower the weight to your chest and you lift it back up. Obviously, there's more technique than just that, but people more or less know the shape of the exercise. Likewise with bicep curls, maybe shoulder presses, things like that. But with a kettlebell, you're dealing with, in particular, a lot of ballistic movements, like I mentioned, swings earlier, a number of other different ballistic movements like cleans, high pulls, snatches, things like that. They look dangerous, and they can be if you don't know how to do them. And people also, I think, in many cases, they're like, well, what does that even work? So it seems to them like it's more of like a series of, maybe we'll say like party tricks or cool things that they could do, but they don't understand exactly what it will do for them. And as I mentioned earlier, that's what people are really interested in, is they want to know, what will this do for me, or for my particular goals. So I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's viewed as kind of a novelty piece of equipment, as opposed to a piece of equipment with hundreds of years of history, maybe even longer. And a lot of people just we haven't reached the point in our culture where it's so ubiquitous that everybody kind of knows what to do with it. We may reach that point, but it may take another 15 years. Maybe it'll take 20 years. But I think that's a big reason why. It's like people have a vague understanding of what it is now, but they don't have that sort of competence as to what it's made to do.
Okay. So with you being in the industry of physical fitness and training people, working out, strengthening, explosion, and all that, and you had to build your business, at what point did you come up with the 9-minute challenge? Because I see where it's used as because people are so bombarded with everything nowadays that they act like they don't have enough time to work out.
Yeah.
So I keep seeing where, in the industries that, these different explosive type of workouts are coming about where, it's only going to take 10 minutes, 9 minutes, 12 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever the case may be. When were you able to develop this?
I wrote it in 2020. And, previous to that, I put out a lot of other different, articles, free reports, challenges, things of that nature. And one of the things that I had noticed, and this was something I had noticed years prior, actually, was that people seem to get the best results with the smallest commitments. And what I mean by that is that, if you ask people, okay, let's say you want to get in good shape, tell me what the process is going to look like. Most of them are probably going to tell you, okay, I go to the gym 5 days a week, I work out for an hour, I do a mixture of, weight training and cardio and all this other stuff. And then you ask them, okay, so what you think, and there's no reason that wouldn't work, but why aren't you doing it? And there are plenty of very good reasons for it. I'm not one of those people who says, oh, what's your excuse? Here's an example of somebody who's got a very stressful and action-packed life, and they're still doing all the things that you agreed you need to do. So what's your excuse? Reality is we all have very good excuses, and it's a mistake to think that it's a good idea to teach someone how to swim by pushing them into the deep end and being like, all right, you'll figure it out, because you have to. People don't like being put in situations like that, and they typically don't respond well to it. So it was about in 2015 in particular, it was a very busy year for me because I was constantly traveling to teach fitness workshops, and my in-person classes that I had were, in some sense, they were suffering a little bit. I remember I had a group of ladies that I was teaching, and I told them, I was like, hey, I'm going to be out of town for 2 weeks. I'm going to go teach this, workshop. And they were like, that's great for you, but for us, we need you because, you're here to teach us and all this other stuff. And then you're gone for a week or 2 weeks, and, we're just kind of in limbo. And so I said, what we're going to do is we're going to put together a chat group. And what I want to do is, I've already taught you a good number of things. So, a certain number of exercises and things like that. Every day, I just want you to check in with your commitment is going to be 5 minutes of exercise of some sort. It could be as simple as going for a walk. It could be as simple as doing some basic calisthenics, anything you want. And once you've hit that 5 minutes, you've hit your commitment, and you can stop. You can keep going if you want, but 5 minutes is your only commitment. And so you'll just check in with me every day and everybody else in the group. And so whether I'm in town or out of town, This way we'll be able to make sure that you're continuing and there are no moments of limbo, let's say. So turns out it was a huge hit because they never missed a day, number one. And part of it was because it was so easy. It's like 5 minutes. It's easier to do it than not to do it. You know, so, but what was interesting is after maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks, the average was 10 minutes a day. So their commitment was still only 5, but often, you know, they would check in, oh, I did 10 minutes of this, that, or the other thing, or 15 or 20. And it became much easier for them to do that because it became a habit. So one of the things that I started to realize was that, you know, people like me who love fitness and love exercise and are just naturally able to carve out the time for it, we figure out how to do that kind of subconsciously. It's like we don't have to be told how to do it. But for people who want the kind of skills and abilities that come naturally to us, we have to sort of reverse engineer how to make it happen. And so the first layer of that is just consistency. So you have to be able to stay consistent with your training, even if it's not something, you know, like super crazy hard. It doesn't have to be. It just has to be something that you can do every day. And what ended up happening was, you know, these ladies were losing weight. They were getting stronger. One of them said that she didn't have to see her chiropractor for like 3 months, and she used to see him like every week. And so she even got a phone call from him like, hey, is everything okay? I haven't heard from you in like 12 weeks. It's like, well, everything was great. You know, she was in better shape than she'd ever been. Yeah, think about that from a chiropractor. Hey, is everything okay? Like, you know, like that's usually a good sign if you don't have to see the chiropractor every week. But so the key with the 9-minute challenge then was to sort of replicate the experience that I'd had at teaching these ladies, which was that everybody has, you know, even 10 minutes to some people just seems like scary, you know, but 9 minutes, it's a singular digit. So people are like, okay, 9 minutes, I can do that. And what's more, the movements that I included in there are movements that you don't really need all that much special instruction for. You know, you do need a little bit, like with anything, but there are no ballistic movements. Like I mentioned the kettlebell swing earlier. So nothing that requires a lot of technique or that you're likely to get hurt doing. The 9-minute challenge is focused around full body movements that require you to use what's called your gait pattern or your body's walking pattern. So if you think about the way that humans move, like if you were in a forest and you saw some movement in the background and you didn't see any details, but you could see that whatever it was walking upright and had a certain kind of movement to you, could say, okay, that was a person. Maybe they're out on a hike. Maybe it was Bigfoot. Who knows? But you could tell that it's a person. Okay. Yeah. Whereas if it's a bears, if you ever see them walk on their hind legs, it's sort of a very awkward kind of movement. So all this to say, the gait pattern is, I would say, the most identifying movement pattern of the human being, and it's what we are best designed to do. We're designed to be on our feet, moving, doing all sorts of different things. So if you get good at that movement pattern, which can manifest itself in a variety of ways, anything from carrying, meaning like you hold something, like, you know, in my challenge, it's just a kettlebell or 2 kettlebells and you walk with them. So it's a great way to strengthen the entire movement pattern by adding a little bit of weight to it. Or similarly, crawling on the ground. You know, it's another way. It's the way that we learn how to build up our gait pattern as babies. And it's also using all of our muscles, but in a slightly different way. So you're kind of like training all these muscles at let's say a different angle or at a different use. And it's allowing you to train a lot of different muscles all at the same time and all toward one specific goal, which is to go from point A to point B. And what I found was that people who do these things, and I had found this from different, you know, programs or challenges that I'd offered in the past, is that people gained a lot from it. And so I thought, well, you know, if I put it into something where people can kind of get, let's say, like a smorgasbord version of it, they take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, add it into their current program, meaning they don't have to put the regular program to the side, but maybe they warm up with the 9-minute challenge, or they do the 9-minute challenge as a finisher at the end of their training, then what I noticed was happening was that people were starting to get much faster results in their training. For the people who really only had time to do the 9-minute challenge, they were still seeing that they were getting leaner, they were getting stronger, they were building muscle, they improved their stamina, their coordination. And the whole idea behind it was to, again, replicate the experience that my female clients back in 2015 had experienced by simply being committed 5 minutes a day. The difference was that with them, I didn't place any limits on exactly what they could do because I had worked with them enough that I knew that they had a certain repertoire of things that they could pick from and that they would be successful with. And since the 9-minute challenge is for people who I don't know, people who I've never worked with, I'm starting with a thing that I am certain that they are least likely to have spent any time training, which is their walking pattern in a variety of different ways. So the whole idea is to give them an excuse to succeed because it's only 9 minutes long and it's something that doesn't require a ton of equipment, to give them a path to succeed by giving them some guidance and, here are moves you do on certain days, here are moves you do on other days, and to give them something that's actually enjoyable. Because nobody likes to, take time out of their day to do something that they know that they should and have it just be like boring and unfun and what have you. And whether my colleagues like it or not, people like to enjoy their training. I call it entertraining a little bit. They need to have something where they feel like it's not a drudgery or a chore, but it's actually something that they really look forward to, because now physical fitness and health becomes something that they associate with positive feelings as opposed to this sort of somber, like, oh, I guess I should do this sort of an event.
So in building your business, right, and your clientele and all that, what things did you have to overcome? One, landing your first client, and then along the way, improvements that you have to make.
That's a very good question. So I got certified again as a kettlebell instructor in 2010. And around that time, I hadn't really thought about myself as a personal trainer type, because my initial plan was to become a linguist. So I really like foreign languages. I think it's, very cool. And it wasn't until I finished my degree, I got certified before I finished my degree. It wasn't until I finished the degree that I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. This is like, it's cool to know foreign languages, but I didn't need a degree to know, to know any foreign languages to begin with. So why get a master's degree? And, I started to come to this very quick realization, and that I was at sort of a crossroads. And it was at about this time that I had a profile on a kettlebell training website that was very well known at the time. And somebody who lived in my town had, she had discovered kettlebells through, there was a guy, Tim Ferriss, who wrote a book called The 4-Hour Work Week, and then later wrote a follow-up called The 4-Hour Body, which kind of purported to show you how to more effectively train yourself. And there was a segment on there about a lady named Tracy Rifkin, who is the wife of a colleague of mine, Mark, who had lost like 120 pounds, primarily with kettlebell training. And the lady who reached out to me, she wanted to lose some weight, and she knew that kettlebells were a great way to do it. So she reached out to me. I had to do almost nothing, basically. And so I started going over to her house twice a week, and I would work with her on the kettlebell movements, and we would do swings and, a variety of other moves that she was more than capable of doing, but just needed some guidance with. And then from there, I started teaching friends, because I was like, hey, I've been talking your ear off about kettlebells for years. Why don't you come over and try a workout? Some of my colleagues, I was a waiter at the time. That's what you do when you have a degree in English, and it's only a bachelor's degree. So I was a waiter at a Mexican restaurant in town, and one of my coworkers, she knew a lady and her husband who were looking for an in-home personal trainer to come and teach them kettlebells. And oddly enough, they decided to hire this waiter. Think about, like, I look at it then and I'm like, this makes sense because I was certified and whatever. But I look at it now and it's like, this guy's like slinging enchiladas, most of the week. And then on the weekend or once a week, he comes over and, he's teaching, kettlebell stuff. So good on them for trusting my
not like, put you in a box like, most people probably would.
Exactly. I mean, I look, even now, I think I would be inclined to put somebody in a box like that. I think maybe given my own experiences, I would be a little bit more forgiving, and I'd be like, okay, he or she's early on in their career, so I'll give them a chance. But yeah, they were very kind to have given me that chance. And as time went on, I a lot of it was through word of mouth. Now,
Mhm.
I do think word of mouth is important, and there is a way that you can kind of commandeer it to in your favor.
Mhm.
I didn't know what that way was, so I really did get quite fortunate in the fact that I had people who would go to bat for me, to talk to other people that they knew. Like
Mhm.
there was a gal that I was friends with. Pardon me, gal that I was friends with, and she worked at a TV station, and
Mhm.
her boss was really into fitness, and she had uh, a trainer, and I for some reason I think they had to stop working together because the trainer took on a new job or opened a gym or something like that, and so she was in the market for a new trainer and
Mhm.
agreed to let a waiter come over to
Mhm.
the TV station
Yeah.
and put her through a workout, and so she hired me, and then eventually from there I'd asked her like, what about putting together like a program for the people who work here? And so she said, okay, let's do it. So I started to run this corporate fitness program,
Mhm.
and so I was very fortunate in that regard. But the majority of my training career, I had very little business acumen, a lot of
Mhm.
passion.
Mhm.
But one thing that you find very quickly is that you can have a lot of passion and even be the best there is
Mhm.
in what you do and still not make a lot of money
Mhm.
because you do need a certain level of, we'll just say, general business acumen. If I had to label
Mhm.
it as just one thing, I would say marketing in
Yeah.
particular. To have a good understanding of how to market your skills and your abilities
Mhm.
toward the people that you're best suited to help in a way that makes them excited to want to seek you out and find your help. So there were many years where I just worked as a in-home personal trainer, which for a short period of time is fine, but the amount of time that you spend commuting to various different
Mhm.
places, it's just not it's not easy to scale that sort of a thing.
Mhm.
And so I enjoyed it, but I will say I definitely suffered for some time because it was like, there's only so much money you can do, and only
Mhm.
so much money you can make. If you're doing something like that as a trainer. So eventually, I got wise, and I opened up an online component to my
Mhm.
to my business, and particularly through email marketing. Now, a friend of mine, Pat Flynn, who is still a very good friend of mine to this day, he for years had kind of like gently nudged me, said you should start an email list. You should start collecting emails, making offers and this sort of a thing. And my vision of myself uh, made it difficult to do that because I saw myself principally as a personal trainer, as
Mhm.
opposed to somebody who was, let's say, a leader or an expert in the field,
Mhm.
which is something that I think gives you a little bit more ability to spread out what it is that you do. So I mean, if you think
Mhm.
about, let's say, the doctor, you go to the hospital and you see a particular doctor, the doctor is only going to make money. I think this is how it works, don't quote me, if he or she is at the hospital seeing patients, and then when they go home, it's, they're not making money anymore. And then you
Yeah.
think about somebody like, let's say, Dr. Oz.
Mhm.
Regardless of what you think of him,
Mhm.
he is somebody who's been involved in a number of different promotions or a number of different you know things that don't require him to be in a particular place at a particular time in order to make money.
Mhm.
So even though he's a celebrated doctor and I believe a surgeon in whatever it was that he did prior to becoming a TV personality, the
Mhm.
majority of his money is nowadays is not made by being at a certain place at a certain time doing a certain thing, and then once he goes home, you know the the
Mhm.
the fountain of money
Mhm.
just kind of shuts off.
Yeah.
So I think the reason it took me a long time to make the changes, because Pat had been telling me since like 2014, he's like, you should start an email list, you should start offering online things. It took until about 2016 before I
Mhm.
really took his idea seriously and started to offer these things, because by now I had managed to sort of change my view of myself as somebody who offered online things as well. I was not strictly an in-person trainer.
Mhm.
And the reason I mentioned the mindset thing is because for most people, they'll ask questions about, you know, what do you need to do to run a business, either in person, online, whatever the case may be. And very often you have to upgrade your own self image. So,
Mhm.
we might want to do a certain thing, we might want to accomplish a certain thing, but if we don't see ourselves as the kind of person who does the things that allows you to achieve a particular goal, your brain is just going to put the brakes on the whole thing, because it's like, it's like you might as well have told yourself you're going to scale Mount Everest with no shoes on. It's just like, why would I even take steps toward it? It's not possible. So that was a big thing, is that it took, and it continues to this day. I always have to kind of work on upgrading, how I view myself, and the kind of things that I need to do in order to achieve the things that I want to achieve. First, have to be able to conceive of them in my mind by viewing myself in a different way. So that was a big change that I had to undergo. But once I started doing regular, email blasts to my list of people, then it became just like, a must do. Like I wouldn't miss a day of doing it. And again, so that's been since about June of 2016. And from there, I started to offer my first ever offering, which was like a monthly paid for newsletter. So it's a PDF that I send out with training information and stuff like that, which has then also gone on to me creating specific like courses, programs, challenges, guides, things of that nature. So information products essentially for people who are ambitious about their training. They have big ambition, but they only have a little time to accomplish it. And so I take the expertise that I've learned over the years and how they can be more effective and efficient at what it is that they want to accomplish, and put whatever time they have available into their training in such a way that they can get more out of what they're doing than they would if they were just to try to figure it out all on their own. Since I've been there, done that, learned from my experiences, and so on and so forth. But on the business side of things, one of the things that I would also mention is that just like somebody who wants to get in better shape needs to invest in a personal trainer, or, even if it's just consulting with one every once in a while to get an idea of what to do in his or her own training, I think it's similar with people who want to run a successful business. You have to invest in understanding better how to run a business. And I think people who are listening to this podcast are already taking a very positive step, because they're people who have decided, I want to start listening to more information on how to be successful. I want to start listening to more information on, I want to surround myself, at least mentally, with people who think like me and who are taking steps like me, because, in their own life, they may not have people like that. So you need to find a tribe, as it were. So that's a big first step. But also finding good sources of information is super important, and you may have to pay for them at some point.
I tell people in my career as being an entrepreneur and doing a multitude of things that I do, that starting out, that's what I did. I looked for the information. Like one of the first businesses I had was I call it music promotions company. I got a degree in business, concentration in marketing, but I always had a love for music. So I started like music promotions was basically marketing of the music. And I went and I bought books. Now I'll be in class. I already did my assignment. I'll be in the counseling and all that stuff. I already did the assignment. Now I'm reading books about that. So I did all the research. But then I started finding people who were in the industry, and I would pay them for their time, because I knew that when doing that, you get to lessen the learning curve. You get to accelerate quicker in what you were trying to do with your goal. And you're avoiding all these pitfalls that you didn't even know that were out there. Jumping into the industry, because it takes someone being active in the industry to be able to tell you what's there and the landmines that are there that, you can avoid. So I always advocate people doing things like that. You'll find like a lot of good free resources, but if you really want the stuff that is going to make a big impact, then yes, that's trial by error with a lot of people, and you need to pay them for their expertise. So I definitely agree with that.
Big time.
I see that, I've been going through your social media, and also I wanted to notate this. Your pictures are fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
They really resonate with me, because the one with you holding the sledgehammer where your hand is at the end of it, really demonstrates strength. I'm like, that was phenomenal. So I don't know who thought of that, if that was you or a combination of you talking with other people and stuff like that, but that really does hit the nail on it.
Hit the nail on the head.
Nail on the head.
It could have hit me in the head, because if you've seen the picture,
exactly.
The head of the hammer is
Yeah,
very
it's
close to
right
me.
there. Yeah.
Oh yes,
So
yeah.
that was phenomenal.
Thank you.
So as I'm listening to your story, I'm seeing evolution, I'm seeing growth. So when did the book come in, and how did you become a best-selling author on, I believe, Amazon with the No BS kettlebell and body weight Kickstarter?
That's a very good question. I'm going to give you, my friend, a
Hmm.
an outline that's very helpful. I think it'll be helpful for pretty much anybody.
Hmm.
Now, the first thing that you have to do when you want to write a book, well, I'll tell you
Hmm.
what a lot of people do, and I'm sure you've seen this too,
Hmm.
is that a lot of people decide I want to write a book or I want to do this or that, and so what they start with is the idea of the fact that they want to write a book, and so then they create a solution that
Hmm.
then goes in search of a problem,
Hmm.
and that's not a great way to do things because
Yeah.
it's like trying to jam a square peg into a round hole, or
Yeah.
however that saying goes.
Yeah.
So the first thing that you want to do is you want to think of what's a problem that people that I help often
Hmm.
face, or at least the people who are in the category of people that I could help
Hmm.
often face.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I had noticed was that there's a lot of great information on kettlebell training and a
Hmm.
fair bit on body weight training, but most people who are interested in kettlebell training also tend to be interested in body weight training. And when I say body weight training, I mean stuff like, we'll say, like push-ups,
Hmm.
pull-ups, things like that. But there's very little, if any, information on learning how to use both of those tools
Hmm.
together and learning them at the same time, because they're both complementary tools, and similarly adding in the element of movement. And when I say movement, I mean things that we might not normally view as like an exercise per se. I think I referred to crawling earlier.
Hmm.
Most people would be like, if they saw you crawling like outside, as people sometimes see me do,
Hmm.
like, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish with this, like, what even is this? It just doesn't look like much
Hmm.
of anything, but it has a great impact on our overall fitness and physical
Hmm.
ability and things like that. And so the OBS kettlebell and bodyweight kickstart is based around these three things. It's kettlebells, calisthenics, and movement. And in particular, getting a kickstart with them so that you can learn how to take the basics, get reasonably good at them, and start to apply them into a training protocol. So step one was to solve that problem, in that people eventually, what normally happens is that, like you talked about, shortening the learning curve by
Hmm.
by seeking out experts in your
Hmm.
field who could help you to learn things more quickly. And so that's what I sought to do, is that I saw that people were typically on this arc of sorts where they
Hmm.
were like, okay, I'm going to discover the kettlebell, and then they're like, oh, you know what, body weight training seems to go well with this. Oh, I need to improve my movement as well. And over the course of time, that might take months or even years before they achieve all of that. So I thought, if I could like shorten that down into a 2 week time period where they would get like a very quick, let's say, taste of all of those things and the impact that it can have on their training, then without question, I can make it a lot easier for them to start achieving the results that they want. And,
Hmm.
for me, that was definitely step number one, is like, I have to distill down what are the things that are most important for them to know. And then how is it that I can teach them these things in a way that, even if they only ever get the book and they never seek out my help specifically, will at least put them on the right path. Meaning, if
Yeah.
they go to their local personal trainer,
Hmm.
and they say, I want to learn how to do this stuff, well, okay,
Hmm.
now they've got a path. So I've done something that I can help them, even if
Hmm.
they're not coming directly to me
Hmm.
for help. And then once you've done that, you simply have to organize it in a way that is going to be beneficial for them. So you have to assume that they know nothing, and that it's up to you to get them. We'll put it this way: maybe not even get them the world's greatest results, but make sure at a minimum that they're not getting hurt.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, people are like, well, let me give this a shot for myself, and maybe they could be convinced later to seek out a personal trainer, or reach out to the author himself to
Hmm.
to get more insights. But at a minimum, you got to make sure you do no harm.
Yeah.
And this is something that is key in personal training, because
Hmm.
obviously, if you're training to get stronger and fitter and healthier, and then next thing you know, you're like, my shoulder hurts, my elbow hurts, I can't bend my knee. It's like, well, you haven't really done a lot to help the person, and they
Hmm.
would have been better off without you. So
Yeah.
you don't want to put them in a situation like that. But then, for putting the book together itself, the the real key after that was, uh, just really getting better at being organized about how to put it all together in a way that would not overwhelm them, because there is a lot of information in there, but they have to feel like each step it's like they're walking up a staircase, as opposed to trying to scale, this like sheer cliff face, where they're just
Yeah.
little crevices they can just barely put their fingers into.
Mhm.
So that was the whole thing, is I had to kind of think, who am I trying to help? What would I need to let them know in order to be willing and, in fact, and excited to take the next step? And then how do I put these steps together in order so they can go from the bottom of the staircase, presumably knowing nothing or very little, to the top of the staircase, where they have achieved a reasonable amount of confidence and competence, where with or without me, they could continue onward and their life has been made better.
Yeah.
So that was essentially it. I was figuring out a problem that I could solve. Who is it that I can best help? And then how do I put together the information in a way that even through the written word and, some pictures and stuff like that, that they are going to be able to reasonably expect to be able to move forward.
Mhm. Fantastic. I love it. So it's like you're building your own empire, right? Because you go from just starting out as a fitness instructor to now, doing classes, like you said, doing the newsletters, building up a
Yes.
database of customers, writing the book, having digital content. And now I see that, you're incorporating social media into that and creating content for informational purposes that will, ultimately sort of like act like a sales funnel.
Yeah.
What do you, one, how do you make the time to do all that? And have you gotten to the point where you have a team, or is it just you doing all this?
Still just me. One
Okay.
day I will have a team. I need to upgrade that, I think, in my own conception of it. Part of it too is, I think, if I have a better understanding of the numbers, like I can more easily predict, I'm going to bring in like this amount of money from this, location doing this, whatever, then it's easier to figure out how much to allocate to a team. For right now, it's just me. The other thing is that, since 2019, I've done this all online. So it was kind of fortuitous, honestly, because I didn't, I didn't see that some pandemic was coming.
Yeah.
It was just like, in 2020, I had set up a bunch of workshops that I was going to be doing all over the world. And I remember thinking, and I had just moved back to Omaha, Nebraska, where I grew up. And I was like, I love training people in person. And so I thought about getting a job at a gym, like just part-time, because I still wanted the online side to be the, my main focus. And then I realized, I was like, okay, I have to think about this from the standpoint of the gym owner. Like, they're not going to be cool with me leaving for 2 to 4 weeks at a time, to go teach abroad. They're gonna be like, well, you have to find someone to train your people. So I thought, well, forget it. I'm just not gonna get a job at a gym. I'll just do everything online.
Yes.
And again, that turned out to be very helpful. So part of it is that it's just built into my daily schedule to, put out content. You mentioned a sales funnel, so this will be a good time to mention, both in terms of my social media presence as well as my book, how I get people onto my email list. Because again, my bread and butter is through the daily email tips that I send out. And in each one of them, there's always an opportunity to buy something. I don't do any real hard selling. I don't find there's any need for it. Some people do very well with it. It's just not my personality. It's more like I like to tell stories and give people tips and get them excited about something. And then if it's relevant to something that I sell, then I include some information on, that particular thing in case people want to, continue to pursue it further. But, with each social media post that I put out, I always make it as engaging as possible. And the only call to action that I have is to get my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge. So I don't try to sell them anything. Some people do, and they do a phenomenal job of it. I find that the way things work best with most people is just to ask them to take the next step, not to ask them to take a big leap. Like
I like
you
that.
mentioned the idea of like an evolution with me. Like I started as a personal trainer, and then I started, some online stuff, and then so on and so forth. And that's exactly right. It's very much, I would say, we'll say maybe a macrocosm of my book, which I described as being just kind of helping people to take the next step, so they go from the bottom of the staircase all the way to the top. Well, it's very much the same, if we want to evolve into something greater. So we just need to have some way of doing that. And so on the we'll say on the zoomed in side of things, yeah, with each of my social media posts, there's always an encouragement for viewers or readers to get my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge. And I'm always very forthright. I tell them, like, if you go to the opt-in page, I let them know that I'm going to email them every day, and there's always
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be opportunities for them to buy things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm not trying to,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. I think authenticity is one of the best sellers of not selling.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing too is, think about it like this. If you have an email list, you have to pay for those people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're paying their rent. They're on your list, but the larger your list becomes, the more you have to pay to keep them on.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense to have people on who really want to be there, and
Mm-hmm.
for people who want to stay there and they want to, create a relationship with you, because the way I see it in particular is, yes, obviously my goal as a business owner is to make money. That's the
Mm-hmm.
goal of any business. But the way in which I do it is not just selling information products or online coaching or consulting, but I want to create a relationship with people, because I
Mm-hmm.
genuinely want people to see that there's a much shorter path to their goals than
Mm-hmm.
what they may have thought otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was a geeky, gangly, completely uncoordinated doofus growing up, and
Mm-hmm.
if I had known all these things as a youth, I would have jumped on it. But there
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't this kind of information for people like me back in those days. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there were a lot of other people who were very similar to me who kind of slipped through the cracks. They always wanted to be physically active, and they always wanted to be strong and fit and healthy. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to let these people know that your heyday is not behind you, it's ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you want to join me on this journey, I want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the most important thing for me is to create a relationship. And that's what I use my daily emails to do, because they hear from me every day. I always have something useful and helpful to tell them. And of course, I always have something useful and helpful to sell them,
Mm-hmm.
because that's, in part because I can't really help somebody unless I sell them something. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned earlier, um, free resources are very
Mm-hmm.
good, but at some point or another, you have to have some skin in the game. So if
Mm-hmm.
it's free, it's much harder, I think, very often for people to see a ton of benefit from whatever it may be, whether it's a course or
Mm-hmm.
a video series, because taking action based off of something that you have not had to give anything to
Mm-hmm.
to receive, there's a disconnect. And so a lot of times people will get great information with free resources, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't take great action because
Mm-hmm.
they've put no skin in the game.
Yeah.
So selling is really a necessity. And so that's one of the reasons I'm very forthright with people about it, because I don't think there's anything dirty about
Mm-hmm.
selling. I want to help you, and I can't help you unless you put some skin in the game. So so that's a big, huge part of it. And my social media is designed to get people to take the next step, get the
Mm-hmm.
9-minute challenge. When people get the 9-minute challenge, the next step is to get them to buy something that I think would be helpful for them.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, the next step is just me helping them to learn and understand better the process of getting stronger, fitter, healthier, moving better, becoming more resilient,
Mm-hmm.
and using all the experience that I've had, making all the mistakes that I've made, and you know tripping and fumbling and stumbling and all that other stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and turning all those experiences into something that helps people to go from, just having no idea what the next step should be, to having a staircase that they can step up and go far beyond what they thought was even possible.
So now you have all this business experience, you have all this experience working on clients and things of that nature, and you've increased your knowledge. I'm sure you developed even more of a passion for what you do based off of the experiences you've had. Going into 2024, what type of goals are you setting for yourself and for your business?
Total world domination. That's the goal. A big one is, I want to put out more books, because one of the things I realized was that, when I released my first book, it was a huge help for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another big one is that I want to have better organization of all the inner workings of my business. And so, a good example is that there are certain things or metrics that I don't track right now, that
Mm-hmm.
I think if I did track them, would make it easier for me to be able to like allocate a certain amount of time or energy in certain directions versus others. Like
Mm-hmm.
My hunch, for instance, is that being a guest on more podcasts is helpful,
Mm-hmm.
because if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it, you hear somebody talk for 30 minutes, 60
Mm-hmm.
minutes.
Mm-hmm.
By the end, they're either pretty hot or cold. They're either like,
Mhm.
"Oh, yeah, this doesn't really sound like it's for me, and this guy's a
Mhm.
dweeb and whatever," or they're
Mhm.
like, "You know what? This guy's
Mhm.
really speaking to me.
Mhm.
I really appreciate what he's doing.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can learn more about him."
Mhm.
So that's another part of it. Well, maybe another way to put it would be shameless self promotion.
Mhm.
Again, I don't think self promotion is a
Mhm.
bad thing. Some people
No, it's
think it.
not. I just want to just add a little bit, and I want you to continue to talk with this stuff.
Sure.
With the podcast, like I say, so since I've been doing this podcasting since 2016. That's how
Nice.
I was able to build up my audience by having so many different guests, and I've talked to like across various industries that I was able to tap into everybody's audience. So
Yeah.
that all those little bitty people who started like, oh, I like the way he does this and asks questions and it's very engaging and things of that nature, they started following. And that built my Facebook page up to the 11,000 followers that I have,
Wow.
or organically.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
You need to be praised for that because I'll tell you what, it is hard to get an organic Facebook audience nowadays. It used to be
Oh,
like in the
yeah.
early days, it was like
Uh-huh. Yeah.
make it as
Yeah.
easy as
Super. Yeah.
possible.
Uh-huh.
And now they're like, oh, now you have to pay to play.
Uh-huh.
And then even when you
I
pay, you're not
told people
necessarily going to get
exactly.
anything.
I told people 5 years ago that Facebook was going to do that.
Yeah.
I literally told them, I was like, y'all gonna Facebook, all the platforms. What they're not going to do is allow people to start making all this money free. So now, if you want to, and Facebook sends me stuff all the time. Data different programs that you could join. They have a lot of tools and stuff that people don't even realize it's in there. If people will go into their meta suites and go, if they have the business page or if they're in the professional mode, you have all these access to tools and stuff, resources that will enhance your page.
Yeah.
Um, but they're not going to sit there and just let people make all this money and stuff, and then they don't get anything out of it. And I get it;
Yeah.
it's a part of advertising and marketing. You want to reach more people, you got to advertise and let people know that you exist, and go
Hmm.
after those new clients and scale and get as big as you want to get, as your heart desire. So I definitely get that. But you can continue. I just want to add that little snippet about the podcast and stuff.
Yeah, you're totally right. That's the thing too. I want to say this for people who are listening. TikTok's going to do the same thing eventually. Okay.
Mm-hmm,
Instagram did it. YouTube did
mm-hmm,
it. Like I know
mm-hmm,
people, I mentioned my friend Pat Flynn earlier. He said the same thing about YouTube. It used to be that he'd put up a video, kettlebell video on YouTube. This is like 10 plus years ago. And it's like, bam, got 20,000, 50,000, 100,000
mm-hmm.
views. And now, he puts something up and it gets like paltry, number of views relative to
Yeah, what
to
you was getting. Uh-huh,
yeah, exactly. And it doesn't matter that the information is great. It's
uh-huh.
just that's the way that it works. Like the social media platforms, it's like they start off and then early on it's easy to get all this organic success. And then once
Mm-hmm.
enough people are on there, then they switch directions, they switch gears so that the next step is that you are adding some sort of an investment in order to be able to excel at what they offer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Um Keep that in mind, folks. I think social media, this is one of the things that is useful to mention too, is that I think social media is a valuable tool,
Mm-hmm.
but you do not want your business to be dependent on it because then in reality, you
Mm-hmm.
don't actually own the business.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook owns the business or Instagram
Mm-hmm.
owns it because you don't have access to the database of people who are
Mm-hmm.
your followers. You don't have access, meaning you can't download it and take it somewhere else. You
Yeah.
can't really access it. So but a lot of people make that mistake. And this is one of the reasons why I think, email marketing is useful because you actually
Mm-hmm.
can take that database, move it elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, all that to say, I think that these are that slow but sure evolution is a huge way to make sure that you are continuing to move forward. And so for me, for 2024, a big part of it is going to be kind of buckling down a bit on getting better getting better at measuring certain metrics that I think will help. Doing more of like what I'm doing here with
Mm-hmm.
some self-aggrandizing, publicity and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, and writing more books, putting myself out in more ways that I've done in years past, but only on a smaller scale. And um, I would also say I have it in mind to create a bunch of new courses and programs and challenges that I think are going to help to solve problems that I've started to notice that a lot more people have that had slipped through the cracks even for me.
Mm-hmm.
And a good example would be kettlebell or body weight training for people who are maybe in the boomer category, their
Mm-hmm.
50s, late 60s, stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and just want to have a better understanding of how to get stronger and fitter using these things, but
Mhm.
might benefit from having different instruction as opposed to the kind of instruction I might give to a 30 or 40-year-old who's
Yeah.
been reasonably active and can kind of speed up their process. So,
Yeah.
whole lot of things, but I would say it would come down to more than anything, expanding my offerings for the people who I can help but have not done enough to help, and then expanding my marketing so that I can reach those people much more easily and I
Mhm.
can help more people crush weakness and forge epic strength.
Mhm.
And no matter what their age, make their heyday something that they can see ahead of them rather
Mhm.
than something that they have to look behind them to see.
I love that. Now I remember reading that too and watching that in videos and stuff. I love the fact that you look at it that way and that you help put that out there so people don't think that their best years have already came, that their best years are actually forward.
Yeah.
But it has been a wonderful conversation talking to you. Let people know if they want to get in contact, they want to learn about information, if they need to email you, get on your email list. What do they need to do?
Well, I would say for sure, if you are interested in the fitness side of things and you're intrigued about this idea of getting stronger, fitter, and healthier, keeping in mind, I'm not an expert in machines or dumbbells and barbells and things like that. It's just kettlebells, body weight, and movement. And
Mhm.
if that does appeal to you, my 9-minute challenge I think would be something that you'd get quite a bit out of. So if you go to 9minutechallenge.com, you'll be able to download a free copy of it. And it will put you on my daily email list, as we've discussed here, and you can leave anytime you want. You know, there's not like one of those movies where somebody joins a cult and they're like, you can leave whenever you want. And then there's like this list of like deadly things to try to leave. You just unsubscribe and you're good to go. And of
Yeah.
course, you can keep the 9-minute challenge. So there's, no hard feelings there.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's what I would say would be the easiest way to get a hold of me. I mean, you can reach out on the various social media channels. I'm on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Instagram. Uh, Usually, I'm pretty good about responding to messages there. Sometimes I don't see them because they may go into a separate category, but by all means, you can reach out to me on there. I'm not on TikTok, I'm not on
Mhm.
Snapchat. I feel that because I'm in my 30s, that's just,
Mhm.
it's unbecoming to be on these like teeny bopper social media channels. So I avoid them. But all the other ones, yes. So that's what I would say. 9minutechallenge.com if you're interested and intrigued by the fitness side of things. Um, and then seek me out on social media. My name is spelled kind of funny. It's Aleks, Aleks, not Alex. And last name is Salkin, Salkin. So check me out. And if you have any questions, comments, snide remarks, fighting words, you just let me know. We'll beef it out online.
Well, thank you for your time. Y'all make sure y'all go and y'all check out the 9 minute challenge, 9minutechallenge.com. And like you said, if y'all want to, y'all go and join that email list. If you want to opt out of it. But if you're interested in fitness and the kettlebell and learning how to use that piece of equipment, or just overall, Mike, I think you have fantastic information to be able to provide anybody.
Thank you
And
very much.
so, yeah, make sure y'all go and y'all do that. And Alex, I appreciate it. I would love to catch up sometime in 2024 to see where you evolve to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope that by the end of it, we have both crushed so many of our goals that
Mhm.
the previous year seems almost unrecognizable.
That's what's up. I look forward to that, and I welcome that.
Absolutely.